Welcome to the Billionaire's Choice. Before we begin today's story, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Every story here is a journey of love, destiny, and life-changing choices. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And now, let's begin. Be my fiancé for 3 days, the billionaire CEO said quietly, sliding a diamond ring across the desk. And I'll solve every problem that's keeping you awake at night. The rain tapped softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Whitmore Capital's 42nd floor, turning the glittering Manhattan skyline into a blur of silver lights. Most employees had gone home hours ago. The hallways were dark. The elevators were nearly silent. Only one office remained lit. Elena Hartwell stared at the email on her screen for the third time, rubbing tired eyes that had spent 12 straight hours reviewing contracts and schedules. Her shoulders ached. Her coffee had gone cold, and somewhere across town, her mother was sleeping in a hospital room Elena could barely afford. She gathered her files, preparing to leave, when her phone buzzed. Callum Whitmore, her boss, the CEO, a man who rarely called anyone directly. "Come to my office," the message read. Now, Elena frowned. It was almost 11 o'clock. Whatever this was, it couldn't be good. Taking a slow breath, she crossed the nearly empty executive floor. Her heels echoed against polished marble. Through the glass walls of the corner office, she could see Callum standing by the window, one hand in his pocket, staring out at the rain-soaked city below. He didn't look like the billionaire magazines loved to photograph. There were no cameras now, no perfect smile, no confidence on display, just a tall man in a dark suit carrying the weight of something invisible. "You wanted to see me?" Elena asked. Callum turned. His expression remained unreadable. "Close the door." Her stomach tightened. She obeyed. The soft click seemed louder than it should have been. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Callum walked toward his desk and placed 3 objects in front of her. A plane ticket, a confidentiality agreement, and a small, velvet box. Elena stared. "What is this?" Callum sat down. "A proposal." She laughed nervously. "A business proposal?" "Not exactly." He opened the velvet box. Inside rested a diamond ring that probably cost more than her apartment building. Elena blinked. Once. Twice. Certain she had misunderstood something. "Mr. Whitmore, Callum." "Callum," she corrected carefully. "What exactly is happening right now?" His jaw tightened slightly. "I need someone to pretend to be my fiancé." The words landed like a thunderclap. Elena stared at him, waiting for the punchline. None came. "You're serious?" "Completely." "Why me?" "Because you're the only person I trust." That answer surprised her more than the ring. Trust. Callum Whitmore trusted almost nobody. The man built walls around himself like they were part of his business strategy. Elena folded her arms. "There are professional actresses for this kind of thing. My family would see through an actress, and they won't see through me." "No," his answer came instantly. Too instantly. As though he had already thought about it 100 times. Elena looked away first. The room suddenly felt smaller. "How long?" she asked. 3 days. "That's all. A weekend." He slid the plane ticket closer. "My grandmother's 80th birthday celebration. The entire family will be there." Elena glanced at the ticket. Private flight. Vermont. Departure Friday morning. Return Sunday evening. The kind of trip people like her only saw in movies. "And why exactly does your family need to believe you're engaged?" For the first time, something flickered across Callum's face. Not confidence. Not control. Something closer to vulnerability. "Because if I arrive alone, they'll spend the entire weekend trying to arrange my future." Elena almost smiled. "That sounds terrible. You have no idea." A faint smile appeared on his face before disappearing just as quickly. Then he reached into a drawer and removed another document. "If you agree, your compensation will be included here." Elena opened it. Her breath caught. The number was life-changing. Hospital bills. Debt. Rent. Every burden she carried seemed to disappear beneath a single signature. Suddenly the ring no longer looked ridiculous. It looked dangerous. "Nobody pays this much for a fake engagement," she whispered. "I do." The rain continued tapping against the glass. Somewhere below, sirens echoed through the city. Elena looked at the contract, then at Callum, then back at the contract. Everything inside her screamed that this was a terrible idea. But before she could answer, Callum spoke again. "There's one condition." Elena slowly lifted her eyes. "What condition?" His expression hardened. The vulnerability vanished. The billionaire CEO returned. "No matter what happens this weekend," he said quietly, "you cannot tell my grandmother anything about your family, your childhood, or where you came from." Elena frowned. "Why?" Callum's gaze locked onto hers. "Because if she learns the truth about you, everything falls apart." The city was still drenched in rain when Elena finally left the office that night, but she barely noticed. Her mind replayed the same sentence again and again. "If she learns the truth about you, everything falls apart." The words followed her through the elevator ride, through the empty lobby, and all the way to the subway platform. Nothing about Callum Whitmore made sense anymore. The fake engagement was strange enough. The generous payment was even stranger. But that condition felt personal. Too personal. Elena sat beside the train window, watching blurred lights slide across the dark glass. Her fingers unconsciously reached for the silver pendant resting beneath her blouse. It was old, slightly worn, and worth almost nothing according to every jeweler who had ever looked at it. Yet she had worn it nearly every day since childhood. Her mother always told her the same thing whenever Elena asked where it came from. "One day, when the time is right, I will tell you the whole story." But the right time had never come. The following morning arrived far too quickly. Elena barely slept. She spent most of the night staring at the unsigned contract on her kitchen table, while hospital invoices sat beside it like silent reminders of reality. By 7 o'clock, her phone rang. "Callum, have you made a decision?" he asked. "No." Greeting. No small talk. Elena almost laughed. "Good morning to you too." A brief pause followed. "Good morning, Elena." Somehow that felt stranger than the proposal. She stared out the window of her small apartment. The building across the street needed paint. The radiator rattled constantly. The refrigerator made noises that sounded suspiciously expensive to repair. This was her real world, not private jets and diamond rings. "I have one question," she said. "Only one. For now." She heard the faint sound of papers moving on the other end of the call. "Go ahead." Elena took a breath. "Why me?" Silence. Not the uncomfortable kind. The careful kind. As though Callum was deciding how much truth to reveal. "Because my family studies people," he finally said. "They notice every hesitation, every lie, every weakness." "That does not answer my question." "You are honest." Elena blinked. "That is your reason?" "It is." She did not know whether to feel complimented or manipulated. Perhaps both. "And the condition?" she pressed. "You still have not explained that." His voice became noticeably firmer. "The condition is not negotiable." "Why?" "Because it protects everyone involved." "Including me?" Another pause. "Especially you." Before she could ask anything else, the line went quiet. Then Callum spoke again. "The flight leaves tomorrow at 9 o'clock. If you agree, a car will pick you up at 7. Elena looked down at the contract. Her mother's medical bills sat underneath it. The amount owed felt impossible. The compensation offered by Callum felt equally impossible. Two impossible choices staring at each other across her table. "I will do it," she said softly. She expected relief from him. Gratitude. Something. Instead, he simply replied, "Thank you." The call ended. 24 hours later, Elena stepped onto a private jet for the first time in her life. The leather seats, polished wood accents, and quiet luxury made her feel as though she had accidentally wandered into someone else's future. Callum sat across from her reviewing documents. Calm. Focused. Untouchable. Almost as if he had not asked his assistant to become his fiancée 48 hours earlier. A garment bag hung nearby. Inside waited several designer dresses chosen for the weekend. Elena glanced out the window as the aircraft climbed through thick clouds. "Are you nervous?" she asked suddenly. Callum looked up from his papers. "About what?" "Introducing your fake fiancé to your family." For the first time that day, a faint smile appeared. "No," Elena folded her arms. "You should be." His smile vanished. Not because he was offended. Because something else had captured his attention. Something distant. Something troubling. "Trust me," he said quietly, staring toward the clouds beyond the glass. "The part one I'm worried about has nothing to do with pretending." The jet touched down just before noon beneath a sky painted in soft shades of gray and blue. Elena followed Callum down the aircraft stairs, immediately greeted by crisp Vermont air that smelled of pine trees and distant rain. A black SUV waited nearby. The driver opened the door without a word. Everything felt effortless in Callum's world. Every detail arranged before anyone needed to ask. During the drive, Elena watched rolling hills pass outside the window. Red barns dotted the countryside. White fences stretched across green fields. It looked nothing like Manhattan. It looked peaceful. Yet the closer they came to the Whitmore estate, the tighter the knot in her stomach became. Then she saw it. The mansion stood on a hill overlooking a private lake, its stone walls glowing softly beneath the afternoon sun. It was less a house and more a landmark. Elegant gardens spread across several acres. Guests in formal attire moved between outdoor tents and terraces preparing for the weekend celebration. Elena suddenly felt very aware of the borrowed designer dress she was wearing. "How many people are here?" she asked quietly. "Around 100, Callum replied. Family. Some business associates. Some people who think they are both." Elena sighed. "That is not comforting." A corner of his mouth lifted slightly. It was not meant to be. The SUV stopped in front of the main entrance. Before Elena could gather herself, the front doors opened. A tall woman in her 40s descended the steps, with perfect posture and a smile that somehow felt rehearsed. "Callum," she said warmly, "you finally made it." Her eyes shifted immediately to Elena. The warmth cooled by several degrees. "And this must be the fiancée." Callum placed a steady hand against Elena's back. "This is Elena Hartwell." The woman extended her hand. "Victoria Whitmore, Callum's aunt." Elena shook it politely. Victoria's smile remained flawless. Her eyes did not. They studied Elena as if searching for a hidden flaw. "We have heard so much about you," Victoria said. Elena somehow doubted that was true. Before the conversation could continue, another voice interrupted. "Well, there she is." A glamorous blonde woman approached from the terrace, holding a glass of sparkling water. She looked about Elena's age and carried herself with effortless confidence. The moment she reached Callum, familiarity filled the air. "You disappeared without returning my calls," she said. "Hello, Brooke," Callum replied evenly. Elena instantly understood. Former girlfriend. Brooke's attention shifted toward her. "And you are the reason, I suppose." Elena forced a pleasant smile. "Nice to meet you." "Is it?" Brooke asked sweetly. Callum's expression hardened. "Enough." The single word ended the conversation. Brooke stepped back, but not before giving Elena a look that promised future trouble. As they entered the mansion, Elena became painfully aware of curious eyes following them. Conversations softened whenever they passed. People smiled. People whispered. People judged. She had expected skepticism. She had not expected to feel like an exhibit. "Relax," Callum murmured beside her. "Easy for you to say. You are doing fine. Your family disagrees." "My family disagrees with everyone." That answer unexpectedly made her laugh. The sound surprised both of them. For a brief moment, the tension eased. Then they entered the grand ballroom. At the far end of the room sat an elderly woman beside a fireplace, surrounded by flowers and family photographs. Unlike everyone else, she was not watching the crowd. She was studying a book resting in her lap. Something about her presence immediately drew Elena's attention. Calm, steady, genuine, as if she alone existed outside the endless performance happening around her. The moment Callum saw her, his entire posture changed. His shoulders softened. The guarded billionaire disappeared. "That is my grandmother," he said quietly. "Evelyn Whitmore." Evelyn looked up. Her eyes immediately found Callum. Then they moved to Elena. For several seconds, she simply stared. Not suspiciously, not critically, almost as though she had seen a ghost from long ago. Elena suddenly felt the silver pendant beneath her blouse resting against her skin. Evelyn slowly rose from her chair. The room seemed to fade around them. Then the elderly woman smiled. A real smile. Warm and familiar. "Well," she said softly, approaching Elena. "It took you long enough to come back." Elena froze. Her heartbeat stumbled. She had never met this woman before in her life. Yet somehow Evelyn looked at her as though they already shared a history neither of them had spoken aloud. For a moment, nobody spoke. The conversations around the ballroom faded into background noise as Elena stared at Evelyn Whitmore, trying to understand what had just happened. "Come back." The elderly woman had said it as naturally as if they had known each other for years. Elena forced a polite smile. "I am sorry," she said gently. "I think you may have mistaken me for someone else." Evelyn studied her face carefully. Instead of appearing embarrassed, she looked almost amused. "Perhaps," she replied. "Or perhaps my memory is better than everyone thinks." Callum stepped forward before the conversation could go further. Grandmother, you have not even welcomed us yet. Evelyn laughed softly. You always interrupt whenever things become interesting. The remark earned a few nervous smiles from nearby relatives. Elena noticed Callum's jaw tighten slightly. It was subtle, but it was there. He was uncomfortable. That realization surprised her. She had never seen the confident billionaire look uncertain about anything. Evelyn reached for Elena's hand. Her touch was warm and steady. Walk with me, she said. An old woman deserves company. Before Elena could respond, Evelyn had already guided her away from the crowd toward a sunlit sitting room overlooking the lake. Callum remained behind, immediately surrounded by relatives eager to claim his attention. Elena glanced back once. Their eyes met briefly. Something passed between them. A silent reminder. Be careful. The sitting room felt completely different from the rest of the mansion. Family photographs filled the shelves. Fresh flowers rested beside old books. Nothing felt staged. Nothing felt designed to impress. Evelyn lowered herself into a comfortable armchair and motioned for Elena to sit beside her. Tell me about yourself, she said. Elena's heart skipped. The condition. She remembered every word. No details about your family. No stories from your childhood. No explanations. There is not much to tell, Elena replied carefully. Evelyn smiled. People who say that usually have the most interesting stories. Elena laughed softly. I work too much. That is probably my most interesting quality. And yet my grandson chose you. Evelyn tilted her head thoughtfully. That tells me far more than your resume ever could. Elena was not sure how to answer. The truth felt dangerous. The lie felt uncomfortable. Fortunately, Evelyn changed subjects. Do you make him smile? Elena blinked. Excuse me. Callum. Evelyn folded her hands. He smiles less every year. It concerns me. Elena found herself glancing toward the window. Outside, guests moved through the gardens preparing for the evening festivities. I do not think anyone can make Callum do anything he does not want to do. Evelyn's laughter filled the room. Now that sounds exactly like him. Hours passed more quickly than Elena expected. They talked about books, travel, favorite foods, and small moments that made life meaningful. Not once did Evelyn treat her like an outsider. Not once did she ask about money, status, or family connections. The contrast between Evelyn and the rest of the Whitmore family could not have been greater. As afternoon turned into evening, Elena found herself relaxing. She almost forgot she was pretending. Almost. Then Evelyn's eyes landed on the silver pendant resting near Elena's collar. The older woman's expression changed instantly. Not dramatically, just enough for Elena to notice. That necklace, Evelyn said quietly. How long have you had it? Elena's hand instinctively moved toward it. As long as I can remember. A gift? I believe so. Evelyn leaned back slowly. Her gaze never left the pendant. Interesting. Elena felt a strange chill. Why? Evelyn opened her mouth, then closed it again. Whatever thought had appeared seemed to disappear just as quickly. No reason, she said with a gentle smile. It simply reminds me of something. Before Elena could ask another question, a knock sounded at the door. Callum entered. Relief crossed his face the moment he saw her. There you are. Were you looking for me? Elena asked. For nearly an hour. Evelyn immediately noticed the concern in his voice. Her smile widened. Well, she said, rising from her chair. Perhaps this engagement is not as surprising as everyone thinks. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. Callum looked away first. And for the first time since arriving at the estate, neither of them seemed entirely certain where the performance ended and something much more complicated was beginning. The evening celebration began as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting golden reflections across the lake below the estate. Soft music drifted through the gardens while guests gathered beneath strings of warm lights. From a distance, everything looked perfect. Up close, Elena quickly discovered perfection was an illusion. Every conversation felt like a test. Every smile seemed to hide a question. Every introduction carried an unspoken challenge. She stood beside Callum, greeting relatives she would never remember, carefully repeating details she had memorized during the flight. Favorite restaurant. How they supposedly met. The timeline of their relationship. The fake story had become so detailed, it almost felt real. Almost. You are doing surprisingly well, Callum said quietly as they stepped away from another group of guests. That sounds like a compliment. It is. Elena glanced at him. I was beginning to think you were incapable of those." To her surprise, he laughed. Not the polite corporate smile she had seen during interviews and shareholder meetings. A real laugh. Brief but genuine. For a moment, they simply looked at one another. Then a voice interrupted. "There you are." Evelyn approached wearing a silver shawl draped over her shoulders. Despite being the guest of honor, she seemed far more interested in finding Elena than speaking with anyone else. "I need help," Evelyn announced. "That sounds serious," Elena said. "It is. The chef insists I approve 3 different desserts. I only want one." Elena smiled. "I am happy to help." "Excellent." Evelyn immediately linked arms with her and began leading her away. "Grandmother," Callum protested. "You are stealing my fiancée." Evelyn glanced back. "If she truly loves you, she will survive 15 minutes apart." Several nearby guests laughed. Elena noticed something unexpected. Callum did not appear annoyed. He looked relieved. As they walked toward the main house, Evelyn lowered her voice. "You make him different." Elena hesitated. "Different how?" "Lighter." The older woman smiled. "Less lonely." The observation stayed with Elena long after they reached the kitchen. Later that evening, guests moved into the ballroom for dinner. Candles flickered across long tables covered in white linens. Conversations blended into a comfortable hum. Elena found herself seated between Evelyn and Callum. What surprised her most was how natural it felt. She had spent years feeling out of place in elegant settings. Yet somehow sitting beside them felt easier than attending ordinary office meetings. During dessert, Evelyn tapped her glass gently. The room quieted. "Before everyone begins another speech," she announced, "I would like to say something myself." 100 guests turned toward her. This family has spent decades building businesses, properties, and accomplishments. Her gaze moved slowly around the room. But none of those things matter if we forget how to care for people. Silence filled the ballroom. "The greatest blessing of this birthday is not another year." Her eyes landed on Elena. "It is being reminded that good hearts still exist." Elena felt dozens of heads turn toward her. Heat rushed into her cheeks. Across the room, Victoria looked unimpressed. Brooke looked irritated. Evelyn looked delighted. The dinner continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. People treated Elena differently afterward. Some became warmer. Others became colder. Evelyn's public approval had made her impossible to ignore. Hours later, after most guests had drifted toward the terrace, Elena slipped outside for fresh air. The night air felt cool and peaceful. Stars reflected across the dark lake. For the first time all day, there were no expectations. No performances. No scrutiny. "Hiding." Callum's voice came from behind her. Elena turned. Taking a break. He stepped beside her. Neither spoke for several moments. The silence felt comfortable. Unexpectedly comfortable. "Thank you," he finally said. "For what?" "For being kind to her." Elena looked toward the ballroom windows where Evelyn could still be seen speaking with guests. That was not difficult. For most people in this world, it is. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She studied him carefully. The billionaire everyone admired suddenly seemed far less invincible than the headlines suggested. Before she could respond, a member of the staff appeared carrying a small wooden box. "Mrs. Whitmore asked me to give this to Miss Hartwell," he said. Elena frowned. "To me?" She said, "It is important." The staff member handed over the box and left. Elena stared at the polished wood. It looked old, carefully preserved, almost treasured. Beside her, Callum's expression changed the moment he saw it. "What is it?" she asked. For the first time all evening, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. "I do not know," he admitted quietly. "But my grandmother does nothing without a reason." Elena waited until she returned to her guest room before opening the wooden box. The mansion had finally grown quiet. Most of the guests had retired for the night, and only the distant sound of laughter drifted through the old hallways. She placed the box on the small writing desk near the window and stared at it for several seconds. Somehow it felt heavier than it should have. Not physically, emotionally, as though it carried a story she was not ready to hear. Taking a slow breath, she lifted the lid. Inside rested 3 items. A faded photograph, an envelope sealed years ago, and a silver pendant. Elena froze. Her hand instinctively moved to the necklace around her neck. The pendant inside the box looked nearly identical. Same shape, same engraved pattern, same delicate design. For a moment she simply stared. Then she picked up the photograph. The image had faded with time, but the people remained visible. An older version of Evelyn stood beside a younger woman holding the hand of a little girl. Elena's pulse quickened. The woman looked familiar, not because she had met her, because she had seen that face every day growing up. It was her mother. Elena sat down abruptly. Her hands trembled as she looked closer. The little girl in the photograph could not have been older than 8. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail. Around her neck hung a silver pendant. The same pendant. The room suddenly felt smaller, quieter, unreal. Elena carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. The paper had yellowed with age. The handwriting belonged to Evelyn. "To my dear friend Sarah," the letter began. "One day your daughter will understand how strong you truly are. Until then, let this remind her that kindness is never forgotten." Elena felt her breath catch. Sarah, her mother. She read the letter twice, then 3 times. The words never changed. Neither did the impossible reality unfolding before her eyes. Someone knocked softly at the door. Elena nearly jumped. "Elena," Callum's voice. She hesitated before opening it. The moment he stepped inside, he noticed the items spread across the desk. His expression darkened. "You opened it. You knew something like this was inside." It was not a question. Callum remained silent. That silence answered everything. "You knew," Elena whispered. "Not everything." He looked toward the photograph. "But enough." Elena stared at him. "Then explain it." For several moments, he said nothing. Finally, he walked toward the window. 15 years ago, my grandmother funded community programs across several states. She never spoke publicly about most of them. Elena listened carefully. One of those programs helped families facing financial hardship. His gaze shifted toward the photograph. "Your mother was one of the people she helped." Elena felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath her. Memories surfaced unexpectedly. Her mother receiving letters she never fully explained. Occasional gifts arriving during difficult years. Moments when rent somehow got paid despite impossible circumstances. "She never told me," Elena said softly. "My grandmother rarely wanted recognition." Callum turned toward her. She believed kindness only mattered when nothing was expected in return. The room fell quiet again. Elena picked up the second pendant. "This is why you made me keep my past secret." Callum looked away. Partly. If the family discovered this connection before the weekend ended, they would assume I knew from the beginning. Elena frowned. "Did you?" "No," his answer came immediately. "I discovered it only a few weeks ago." "How?" Callum exhaled slowly. "My grandmother asked questions about you after she met you at a charity event years ago. She remembered your name. When I investigated, I found old records." Elena stared at him. "And that is when you asked me to come here." "Yes." "Why?" The question hung between them. Callum's expression softened in a way she had never seen before. "Because she has spent years hoping she would see you again." Elena's eyes moved back to the photograph. Suddenly Evelyn's strange welcome made sense. The familiarity, the warmth, the certainty. She had not mistaken Elena for someone else. She had recognized her. Not completely, not immediately, but enough. "There is something else," Callum said quietly. Elena looked up. "What?" His gaze held hers. "My family cannot find out tomorrow." The seriousness in his voice returned instantly. "If they do, they will turn this into a story about inheritance, influence, and manipulation. Even if none of that is true. Especially then." Elena looked down at the photograph once more. A connection hidden for 15 years had resurfaced in a single weekend. And somehow she knew the discovery was only the beginning. The final day of the celebration arrived beneath bright autumn sunshine. Guests filled the estate from morning until evening, gathering for brunches, photographs, speeches, and endless conversations. On the surface, everything appeared flawless. Beneath that polished image, tension quietly spread through the Whitmore family like an approaching storm. Elena felt it everywhere she went. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Certain relatives watched her with growing suspicion. Brooke barely bothered hiding her hostility anymore. And Victoria's polite smiles had become noticeably colder. By late afternoon, preparations began for the grand birthday dinner that would officially conclude the weekend. Staff members moved through the ballroom, arranging flowers and candles. A string quartet rehearsed softly near the stage. The atmosphere felt elegant, important, almost ceremonial. Elena stood in front of a mirror fastening a pair of earrings when her phone vibrated. A message from the hospital. Her heart immediately tightened. For one terrifying second, she feared something had happened to her mother. Instead, the update brought relief. Her mother's condition remained stable. Elena closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. She never noticed the door open behind her. "Good news?" Callum asked. She turned toward him. "My mother is doing well." Genuine relief crossed his face. "I am glad." Elena studied him carefully. The concern looked real, not part of their arrangement. "Real. Thank you," she said quietly. Something unspoken lingered between them. For a brief moment, neither seemed interested in maintaining the illusion anymore. Then a sharp knock interrupted the silence. A member of the household staff appeared at the door. "Mr. Whitmore, your aunt is asking for you downstairs." Callum nodded. "I will be there shortly." Once the door closed, Elena noticed his expression darken. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing." "That means it is definitely something." Despite the situation, a faint smile touched his lips. "You learn quickly." He hesitated before adding, "Just be careful tonight." The warning settled heavily in the room. "You think something is going to happen." "I think people become unpredictable when they believe money is involved." An hour later, the ballroom glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Every seat was filled. Guests dressed in formal attire filled the room with conversation and laughter. At the center sat Evelyn, radiant and happy, surrounded by family. Elena remained beside Callum as speeches began. One relative after another stood to praise Evelyn's accomplishments, generosity, and wisdom. The evening progressed smoothly. Too smoothly. Elena should have known it would not last. Brooke rose unexpectedly from her table near the front of the room. A microphone appeared in her hand. "Before we conclude," she announced with a bright smile, "I think everyone deserves a little honesty." The room gradually fell silent. Callum immediately stood. "Brooke." His tone carried a warning. She ignored it. "After all," she continued, "family gatherings should be about truth." Elena felt her stomach drop. Across the room, Victoria did not look surprised. In fact, she looked prepared. Brooke lifted several printed documents. "Did everyone know our future bride has a very interesting connection to this family?" Murmurs spread instantly. Callum moved forward. "Stop." Brooke's smile widened. "Why?" "Because you are afraid they will discover this engagement is not what it appears to be." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Elena felt every eye turn toward her. "Brooke," Evelyn said firmly. "Sit down." But Brooke continued. 15 years ago, Evelyn Whitmore secretly supported Elena Hartwell's family. She waved the papers. And somehow, years later, Elena appears as Callum's fiancée just before important family decisions are being discussed. The accusations spread through the room faster than reason. Questions erupted from every direction. Some guests looked shocked. Others looked vindicated. Victoria slowly rose to her feet. "Perhaps everyone deserves an explanation." Elena suddenly understood. This had been planned. Not by one person, by several. Callum stepped directly beside her. His voice cut through the chaos. "Enough." The room quieted. "Elena has done nothing wrong." "Then explain it," someone demanded. "Explain why she is here." Callum opened his mouth. But Elena already knew what would happen next. No explanation would matter. Every word would only create more suspicion, more accusations, more damage. Her eyes found Evelyn's across the room. The older woman looked heartbroken. Not angry. Heartbroken. That was what hurt most. Elena took a slow breath. Then she made a decision. Before Callum could speak, she stepped away from him. "You do not owe anyone an explanation because of me," she said softly. Callum immediately shook his head. "Elena, do not." But she already knew what she had to do. If she stayed, the conflict would only grow. If she left, perhaps the family would stop tearing itself apart. Without another word, Elena turned and walked toward the ballroom doors, leaving behind the celebration, the accusations, and the man whose hand she suddenly realized she did not want to let go. The drive back to Manhattan felt longer than the trip to Vermont. Rain streaked across the windows of the car as Elena stared silently at the city lights appearing in the distance. Her phone rang several times. She never answered. Messages filled her screen. Some came from coworkers. Some came from unknown numbers. All of them asked questions she did not want to answer. Only one message mattered. Callum's. It contained just 4 words. "Please let me explain." Elena read it repeatedly. She never replied. 3 days later, life had almost returned to normal. Almost. She sat behind her desk at Whitmore Capital reviewing reports and schedules, pretending everything was fine. But every hallway reminded her of Callum. Every meeting reminded her of the weekend. Every quiet moment reminded her of the ballroom doors closing behind her. The fake engagement had ended. The feelings had not. Across town, Callum faced a very different battle. The Whitmore family had turned the celebration into a scandal. Rumors spread quickly. Relatives demanded explanations. Board members asked questions. Investors watched carefully. For the first time in years, Callum stopped trying to control the narrative. Instead, he began searching for the truth. Not about Elena. About his family. The answer arrived through Evelyn. One afternoon, she invited him to her apartment overlooking Central Park. The moment he arrived, she placed a thick folder on the coffee table. "What is this?" Callum asked. "Your grandfather's final instructions." His brow furrowed. "I thought everything was settled years ago." Evelyn smiled sadly. "That is what everyone assumed." Inside the folder were letters, notes, and records spanning decades. Callum spent hours reading them. By the time he finished, his entire understanding of the family legacy had changed. The inheritance everyone fought over had never been tied to marriage, never tied to status, never tied to wealth. His grandfather had written something extraordinary. True leadership belongs to the person willing to place people before power. The sentence appeared again and again throughout the documents. The family had spent years chasing money while completely missing the lesson behind it. Evelyn watched quietly as Callum absorbed the truth. "Your grandfather built an empire," she said softly. "But he feared what would happen if future generations valued success more than kindness." Callum thought immediately of Elena, of her concern for her mother, her honesty, her refusal to take advantage of anyone, her willingness to walk away rather than create more conflict. Suddenly, everything became clear. That evening, Callum made a decision that shocked everyone. He called an emergency family meeting. The following weekend, relatives gathered inside the Whitmore headquarters boardroom expecting another argument. Instead, they found a very different version of Callum. Calm, focused, certain. Victoria sat near the front. Brooke remained beside her. Both appeared confident. That confidence disappeared within minutes. Callum stood before the room and presented every document Evelyn had shared. He explained the true purpose of the family legacy. He revealed the complete history behind Evelyn's charitable work. He showed records proving Elena had received nothing from the family beyond kindness offered years before. Most importantly, he publicly accepted responsibility for the deception surrounding the engagement. "If anyone deserves criticism," he said firmly, "it is me." The room fell silent. Elena Hartwell never asked for money, never asked for influence, never asked for any advantage. His gaze moved around the table. In fact, she repeatedly chose integrity when it would have been easier not to. No one interrupted. No one argued. For once, facts spoke louder than assumptions. Then came the final surprise. Callum closed the folder and looked directly at the board. "If maintaining my position requires sacrificing the values my grandfather believed in, I am prepared to resign." Audible shock spread through the room. Victoria stared at him. Brooke looked stunned. Even Evelyn seemed surprised. Yet Callum felt calmer than he had in years. For the first time, he was no longer protecting power. He was protecting something that mattered more. Later that evening, after the meeting ended, Callum stood alone in his office watching the city below. His phone rested in his hand. One number remained unsent. One conversation remained unfinished. Across town, Elena was leaving the hospital after visiting her mother when her phone vibrated. She almost ignored it. Then she saw the message. It was not a request. It was not an explanation. It contained only one sentence. "I finally understand what my grandfather was trying to teach me, and it took losing you to learn it." 3 months passed. Winter slowly gave way to spring, and with it came changes neither Elena nor Callum could have imagined during that weekend in Vermont. Elena focused on her mother's recovery and returned to a quieter life. Yet one unexpected opportunity changed everything. Using a charitable grant that had existed long before she ever met Callum, she helped launch a community cardiac support center dedicated to families struggling with medical expenses. The project grew quickly. Volunteers joined. Local businesses contributed. Doctors donated time. What began as a small effort became a place where people found practical help and genuine hope. Elena poured her heart into it. For the first time in years, She felt as though she was building something meaningful. Meanwhile, Whitmore Capital experienced its own transformation. Callum remained chief executive officer, but not because he fought to keep the position. The board had unanimously asked him to stay after witnessing the integrity he demonstrated during the family crisis. The changes he introduced surprised everyone. Community investment programs expanded. Employee support initiatives increased. New charitable partnerships emerged across the country. People who had once described him as distant now described him differently. Accessible, thoughtful, human. Yet despite all the success, one absence remained. Neither Elena nor Callum had seen each other since the night of the family meeting. They exchanged occasional messages about Evelyn and Elena's mother. Nothing more. Sometimes the most important conversations require time before they can happen honestly. On a bright Saturday morning in May, Elena stood outside the newly completed community center adjusting a ribbon near the entrance. Families filled the courtyard. Children laughed nearby. Volunteers arranged tables covered with flowers and refreshments. A large sign above the entrance carried the name Sarah Hartwell Community Heart Center. Elena looked up at it and smiled. Her mother stood nearby speaking with guests, healthier than she had been in years. "Your father would be proud," Sarah said softly. Elena felt emotion tighten her throat. "So would the woman who helped us all those years ago." Sarah nodded knowingly. "Especially her." As if summoned by the thought, a familiar voice spoke from behind them. "I hope I am not late." Elena turned. Evelyn Whitmore stood at the entrance holding a bouquet of white roses. Her eyes sparkled with pride. The crowd immediately welcomed her. Elena crossed the courtyard and embraced her warmly. "You came." "Of course I came." Evelyn smiled. "I would not miss this for the world." For the next hour, speeches were given and stories were shared. Gratitude filled every corner of the celebration. Finally, as the official ceremony ended, Evelyn approached the microphone one last time. "Before everyone leaves," she announced, "there is one final presentation." Confused murmurs spread through the audience. Elena looked around. She had not planned another presentation. Evelyn's smile widened. This young woman believes today's celebration belongs to everyone except herself. Laughter drifted through the crowd. "I disagree." She motioned toward the entrance. "Someone would like to thank her properly." Elena turned instinctively. Her heart stopped. Callum stood there. Not in an expensive suit. Not surrounded by executives. Just Callum, holding a small velvet box. The same kind of box that had started everything months earlier. The crowd gradually realized what was happening. Silence settled across the courtyard. Callum walked toward her slowly. Every step felt deliberate, honest, real. When he finally stopped in front of her, neither spoke for several seconds. There was no audience in his eyes. No performance. Only sincerity. "The first time I gave you a ring," he said softly, "it came with a contract." Gentle laughter moved through the crowd. Even Elena smiled. "The second time," he continued, "I wanted to come with a promise." His voice remained steady. "You taught me that leadership means nothing without compassion. That success means nothing without people to share it with. And that the most valuable things in life cannot be negotiated." Emotion shimmered in Elena's eyes. "Callum," he opened the velvet box. Inside rested a simple diamond ring. Elegant, timeless, real. "Will you marry me?" he asked quietly. "Not for a weekend. Not for appearances. Not because anyone expects it." His smile softened. "Just because I love you." Tears filled Elena's eyes before she could stop them. The answer had been waiting for months. "Yes," she whispered. Then she laughed through happy tears. "Yes, I will." Applause erupted around them. Evelyn wiped away a tear of her own. Sarah smiled brighter than anyone. As Callum slipped the ring onto Elena's finger, she realized the greatest twist in their story had never been the fake engagement, the family secret, or the inheritance. It was the simple truth that one act of kindness from years ago had quietly connected two lives long before either of them knew it. And now, surrounded by family, friendship, forgiveness, and hope, the promise that began as a performance finally became real. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share this video, and let us know where you are watching from, and subscribe to the Billionaire's Choice. Every week, we bring you heartwarming stories of love, destiny, and life-changing decisions. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new story.